This week, the Midnight Freemasons is looking for a few good writers. We've also got Worshipful Brother Patrick Day, who tells us the history of the Christmas tree. Is it really a Christian ripoff of a pagan tradition? Is it cultural appropriation or something else entirely? Brother Patrick Day is going to lay it all out for us, and by the end, you might as well have a PhD in Christmas trees. We'll also hear from Brother Andy Albright, who's written a fantastic paper on the concept of civil disobedience. How does civil disobedience square up with tenets of Freemasonry, the right to protest, foundations of freedom and liberty in our own well-governed nation? Andy asks the important question, does our citizenship require that we should obey laws that are unjust, unconstitutional, or in violation of what Masons might even consider basic human rights? Finally, we'll wrap it up with a contemplative exercise and talk about the importance of accepting success and just saying thank you. All this and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
Welcome back. This is episode number 573. My thanks goes out to our supporters of the program, our contributors, fellows, producers, and legacy partners for being a part of the WCY podcast and allowing us to bring this Masonic education to the world. Over 2.5 million listeners worldwide tune into the WCY podcast for education related to Freemasonry and its kindred sciences because they trust us, and that is much appreciated. We are not out here to sensationalize anything. We are bringing legitimate information about Freemasonry and various occult sciences and philosophies of ideas, all in the hopes of engaging more people and switching them on, perhaps not even to Freemasonry, but to bigger ideas of at least the larger mission of making ourselves better so that we can leave this world a better place. So my thanks again goes out to those contributors, fellows, producers, and legacy partners. If you want to learn more about how you can help support the WCY podcast and its mission to do this, head on over to wcypodcast.com, click on support the show, and check out your options. First up this week, I want to say that I've got various speaking engagements in the works, emails going back and forth with several lodges and people trying to organize some things. So if you're one of them, just know that I really appreciate the opportunity. I am trying to lock all this stuff in the midst of getting ready for the holiday season. And every day I walk through my house and I just think I should clean that. And then I don't. And I have been on a rampage lately, manic cleaning episodes where I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off, cleaning things up as we do sometimes, right? Especially maybe I've got my months mixed up here and I'm doing my spring cleaning now. I don't know. But in any case, I've just been super busy. And so I appreciate all of your patience with waiting for responses and things. And feel free to, if I have forgotten something, you are not going to offend me if you ping me again and say, hey, Brother RJ, just wanted to follow up on this. In fact, it's appreciated. That way I don't miss the opportunity and I don't leave you hanging. First up this week, I wanted to read a little something that Brother Darren Lehners put out just recently. And it's a little bit of a call to action and more of a to say, hey, we could really use some help. Now, many of you know the Midnight Freemasons has been around for like ever, right? And the Midnight Freemasons is one of the best blogs on Freemasonry that has ever been. We've got readers all over the world, based here in my home state of Illinois, and started by the illustrious Todd E. Creason, who named the website Midnight Freemasons because he tended to do most of his writing after midnight. And eventually he changed it from the Midnight Freemason to the Midnight Freemasons because he got more contributors to the blog when he got busy. And eventually he got so busy, he was going to shut it down. And I said, I can't let that happen, Todd. I need to keep this website going because it's a great outlet for writers and it is inspiring to the readers, and people take these articles to their lodges and use them as education pieces. So what can we do? So I became a managing editor of the website for years, and then I got busy with school again, and I passed it over to Worshipful Brother Darren Laners, who has been such a wonderful custodian. But let's hear what he has to say, because I think this is important, and I think we're looking for you. So what do I mean? Here we go. We Want You by Midnight Freemason contributor, Worshipful Brother Darren A. Laners. Visiting is pretty, visiting is good. Seems that all they ever wanted was a brother. This can be a secret, we can keep it good. Even all they ever wanted had a problem. Foo Fighters. The above lyrics are from the Foo Fighters' debut single release entitled This Is a Call, and I never pondered how Masonic the first verse is. When thinking about writing this article, it popped into my head maybe because this article is also a call to action. Over the past 13 years, the Midnight Freemasons blog has brought Masonic light to brethren all over the world. Created by Brother Todd E. Creason, who served as its editor until Robert Johnson came along, and slowly Todd handed those duties over to RJ. I started as co-managing editor a few years ago in order to help RJ out, and now I'm the managing editor. Over this time, we've seen our regular contributors come and go, become emeritus, and unfortunately, some have passed away. I'm looking for the next batch of regular contributors for the blog to help take it into the late 2020s and hopefully beyond. It's really not that hard to write. Heck, if I can do it, then anyone can. Honestly, I never saw myself as a writer. 5 years ago, I started down this path. You want to know what keeps me going? It's you. It's knowing that the readers of this blog look forward to that next article to perhaps use as lodge education. You've been seeing me curate a bunch of older articles from archives recently. You're going to see this trend continue through December and perhaps into January 2023. My apologies for this, but I moved homes on November 30th, and I have to get my old home ready to sell. I also have gallstones, which means that my gallbladder is going to have to be removed. I had been getting some weird random chest pains, and they were discovered, unfortunately, while investigating the chest pains. I had an irregular EKG, so I can't have surgery until my cardiologist gives the okay for me to do so. I'm scheduled for a CT scan of my heart on December 7th, after which time I'll see what's going on with it and hopefully have my surgery. Normally, I would not share this personal information with you, but as most of you readers are my brothers, I do so in the spirit of brotherly love and truth. If you are interested in writing for this blog, email me at the email address below. The only commitment is that you try to write an article every month. Ideally, my hope is that we can get enough contributors so that we have fresh material every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for you to consume. In any case, you've probably noticed the blog looks different. I thought that it was time for a change, to look more like midnight and less like midday. I think it helps the blog look a little more modern. I hope you like the new look. I hope all of you have a happy and safe holiday season. Until then, I hope you enjoy the holiday-themed articles I've curated for the rest of December, as well as the reprints of Worshipful Brother Hosler's 50-Year Mason series. Darren A. Laners. So first of all, yes, the blog looks fantastic. I love the midnight look. I love the way it looks on my mobile. So check it out, midnightfreemasons.org. And there's nothing really for me to reiterate here. Looking for you to do some writing. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. People always ask, how long do you want the articles? Give me 2 paragraphs. We'll do a little bit of editing if we need to, and we'll get it up for you. Believe it or not, the Midnight Freemasons has been a launching point for several Freemasons to launch not only their career in Masonic writing, but in talking and visiting lodges and doing these tours where they're speaking, and then they write a book. And where did they get their start? Maybe right here at the Midnight Freemasons. We really do consider ourselves one of the premier stepping stones for Masonic authors. So next up, before we get into our other educational article, let's get into the Masonic Mythbusters for this week. Now, Worshipful Brother Patrick Day has indeed outdone himself. He usually produces longer segments where we explore a concept, and he gives us the real story, the backdrop of history or context that really does matter in allowing us to understand these things in wonderful ways. Last week, we premiered the first in a series of special Christmas-themed segments for the show. Last week, we talked about Mithras and the myth of Mithras candles. And this week, let's get a little bit deeper into the season. Brother Patrick Day is going to talk about the Christmas tree.
In a digital landscape filled with historical inaccuracy, out-of-context quotes on memes and sound bites, there is an epidemic of fraternal occult, mythological, and historical misinformation. It's time to set the record straight. Masonic Mythbusters with Patrick Day.
Today, we're gonna continue with Christmas Myths, Part 2, focusing on Christmas trees. Hooray! Christmas trees. I love Christmas trees. Like, if I were a Christmas tree, I'd be so many colors. You've probably seen memes, and you may have even been told in church that Christmas trees were stolen, or borrowed, or appropriated from the pagans. So, did they? Is that true? Kind of, but also not really. Like all things, it's always way more complicated than that. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, but it wasn't like there were roving bands of Christians wandering around the countryside looking for pagan traditions to steal. That's not how this sort of thing works. Usually, what we are dealing with is known as cultural exchange. When two different cultures meet, they tend to exchange ideas. It's not a malicious thing, as, say, such and such was stolen. Rather, it's more like, hello, new culture, this is our God. Our God is pretty cool. Our God will give you eternal life. And the new culture then says, we like your God, we will convert, but we also want to keep doing things like decorating trees because it's a tradition of ours that is impressed upon our cultural identity, and it's also really pretty. And then the newcomers say, oh, that is pretty. Well, since we'll be spending a lot of time together, we will do that also. But because it is indeed pretty. Do you mind if we share it with the others? No, not at all. Hooray. Of course, that is comically abridged, but that's kind of how such traditions and customs get exchanged between cultures over centuries. Two or more cultures meet, they share ideas, they get modified upon being introduced into the new culture to suit their own cultural identity, and then they spread around. Cultural appropriation was not really a thing in the ancient world, as cultures borrowed from each other all the time, quite freely. The Islamic world did not complain when Europeans started using their number system. The Greeks didn't complain when Romans started using their myths and style of architecture, etc. Such cultural exchanges did not have the same sensitivity they do today. So back to Christmas trees. Now, there are early predecessors to Christmas trees. Trees had long been worshipped and decorated. In fact, something resembling the principle of the Christmas tree is mentioned in the book of Jeremiah as a heathen practice that should be avoided. Quote, "Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, for the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe. They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not." Jeremiah 10, 2-4. Now, this is more of a vanity than an outright prohibition, such as those, outlined in Leviticus. So remember that when someone says that Christmas trees are prohibited in the Bible. Though the Puritans thought Christmas trees were pagan and therefore sin and therefore prohibited them. Yeah, the Puritans weren't very fun. So the Christmas tree, where did it start? Like all things awesome about Christmas, it began with the Germans. I don't know why, but the Germans had the best ideas for Christmas holiday customs. Perhaps the earliest mentioning of anything resembling a Christmas tree is, in Christian folklore, is the tale of Saint Boniface, an Anglo-Saxon Benedictine monk doing missionary work in the Frankish Empire, in which he cuts down the old Donner oak tree, and an evergreen tree then springs up in its place. The triangular evergreen resembles the symbol of the Trinity, thus being a sign for the people that the Trinity is supreme over all pantheons. I wonder if after this event, the Hessians asked St. Boniface if they could decorate the new tree, and he was like, yeah, sure, knock yourself out, just don't worship it. Anyway, this event is reported to have occurred in the 8th century. Then there's just nothing for a few hundred years. A prototype for Christmas tree sprang up in various Eastern European guild halls in the 15th century, largely in modern-day Estonia and Latvia. They were said to be decorated, and they had sweets placed upon the boughs for apprentices and children of journeymen and masters to enjoy. In the 16th century, it is said that Martin Luther created the first Christmas tree. Whether this was a syncretism of previous Christmas tree prototypes with the legends of the Great Reformer is debatable, but he is said to have taken a triangular evergreen and set lit candles upon this. And this, if true, was a first. No one ever thought it was a good idea to put candles on trees before, for obvious reasons, but Martin Luther did. What ultimately distinguishes a Christmas tree is that it is symbolic of the tree of paradise in medieval mystery plays. Usually when I bring up mysteries, I usually say they don't have anything to do with the mysteries of the universe. It's usually just because we don't know. Mystery cults, they're called that because we don't know. Here, we call them mystery plays because they do mean the mysteries and the mystical concepts of salvation and the mystery of the soul. Now, in Christmas mystery plays of the Middle Ages, 2 trees were frequently depicted. One tree with some apples on it, representing the tree of knowledge that Adam and Eve ate from. The other tree was adorned with communion wafers, representing the body of Christ as the fruit upon the tree of Golgotha, the new tree of life, the cross. Soon such trees began appearing in individual homes. The apples soon became red balls. Yeah, those red balls are not arbitrary. They're supposed to be apples. Actually, it's funny, in my family, we have apples in our Christmas tree because one of our relatives was a teacher. So every year she'd give everybody apples to put on their Christmas trees, and I remember thinking that was so ridiculous as a kid. And then I grow up and I find out the red balls on Christmas trees are supposed to be representative of the apples on the tree of knowledge. Then the wafers become cute shaped cookies. So yeah, cutely shaped cookies on Christmas trees is not arbitrary either. They're supposed to be communion wafers. And then add some candles and bam, you got a Christmas tree. The star upon the tree, as far as I can surmise, was likely introduced by the Moravians. The Moravians gave us Easter sunrise services, the Moravian star, and the best cookies ever, because once again, the Germans gave us the best Christmas traditions. Just as Christmas trees came from mystery plays and then were brought into the home, so too did nativity scenes start in nativity plays and then move into homes. So a star, being the Star of Bethlehem, was set on the highest thing in the home, the tree. Now eventually candles became electric lights because that was smart, and then we started adding tinsels and ribbons, etc. Ultimately, the Christmas tree is really a Christian invention. It is a folk tradition inspired by medieval mystery plays, representing the tree of life, the fruit of immortality, i.e. Christ upon the cross in the paradise of God, and it gets added with some apples or red balls. It was meant to invoke the image of immortality in the Trinity. Not a lot of previous trees that were worshipped were evergreens. They tended to be things like oaks, ashes, birches, hazels, poplars. I guess the Apollonian laurel tree is an evergreen, so I'll give him that. I mean, even in the next passage of the book of Jeremiah I just quoted, he describes the palm tree. I mean, sure, we decorate palm trees with lights in coastal regions, but that's not a Christmas tree. And I mean, we know it. It's just festive. These old trees that were being venerated as gods or as conduits of the gods, the Christmas tree is neither God nor Christ nor conduit for God or conduit for Christ. It is just a lovely adornment of the home to remind Christians of the Trinity, the promise of immortality, and to remember Christ as the fruit of life upon the cross. So we have about 700-year gap between St. Boniface cutting down the oak and the prototypes of Christmas trees in guild halls. And then the Christmas trees proper emerge in Bavaria, being derived from mystery plays. No one was looking back at what some pagans were doing centuries ago and saying to themselves, let's do that with pine trees and candles and communion wafers. And really what we're looking at are archetypes. Trees are cool, decorating them is fun, and it makes things look festive. In a world full of crap ideas, when we stumble upon a good idea, it tends to reiterate itself in diverse situations and manifestations. Could Christmas trees be an old pagan remnant that stuck around somehow? Maybe, but unlikely. As we see an immense gap between Germanic and Celtic tree veneration and Christmas trees proper. Could have been inspired by old reports, maybe people were looking back at the story of St. Boniface and going, hey, let's do that. Maybe, but it just doesn't fit with how we see the modern Christmas trees emerge. Ultimately, it is a German Christian custom that is comparable to similar customs in other cultures, in other regions, in other times, in the history of the human civilization of this planet for different reasons with different significances. It's not really the same thing, but it is fascinating how similar it can be.
All right, what a wonderful segment on the Christmas tree. I wanted to say something up front like trigger warning. All of us really appreciate the educational approach that Brother Patrick Day brings to us with all of the history and the context, looking at sources from around the world to bring us the truth here. There are some, however, that do not appreciate it and look at it almost as if we're attacking something. Nothing is being attacked at all. In fact, things are being celebrated. And so I would just say that some people probably thought, oh, great, Patrick is going to destroy the Christmas tree and whatever. And he obviously does not. I hope you enjoyed the segment. I know I did, and I certainly learned quite a bit. Let's move on to this week's educational piece. Now, last week, I read a piece by Brother Andy Albright, 32nd degree, KCCH of the Valley of Charleston, South Carolina. And it was a wonderful piece entitled, And Justice for Some. It got a great response. Well, after Brother Andy heard the treatment we gave his paper, he did submit another one. And he said, in the vein of similar type topics, I think you'll find this one interesting as well. And I certainly did. And so, to that effect, I would like to read to you another article from Brother Andy Albright, a wonderful article called In Defense of Civil Disobedience by Brother Andy Albright. The very foundation of freedom and liberty in any well-governed nation is the right or ability of its citizens to gather and protest the unjust actions of the government. The right of the people to freely assemble weighed so heavily on the founding fathers that they made such a right the very first guarantee in the Constitution of the United States. The most obvious question is whether or not protest is the same as civil disobedience. While we have the right to assembly, we are all bound by our citizenship to obey the just laws of our country. However, what should free men do when a law is established that is clearly unjust, unconstitutional, or in violation of basic human rights? Does our citizenship require that we should obey such laws? Quote, one has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. Dr. Martin Luther King, written in a letter while in Birmingham, Alabama jail. Civil disobedience as opposed to vile rioting and senseless destruction to unjust laws is as much a responsibility of free citizens as their duty to obey just laws. The preservation of freedom and liberty does not come without labor. Albert Pike's comments in Moral and Dogma. Free men cannot just assume that their freedoms can never be reproached upon by tyrants. Changes and shifts in political ideologies are the doorways leading to the oppression of freedom. Not too far back in American history, the most basic rights of freedom and liberty were not granted to all. The history of the United States is defined largely during the 1950s and 60s by the advancement of civil rights to all of America's citizens. The civil disobedience of this era was largely responsible for this advancement. A disobedience need not be something large or overly dramatic. The simple act of sitting in what was considered the wrong bus seat was enough to induce a federal case. 4 students started a movement by doing nothing more than sitting at a Woolworth's lunch counter. The Greensboro Four, where on February 1st, 1960, 4 black students, Ezell Blair Jr., David Richmond, Franklin McCain, and Joseph McNeil, staged a sit-in at a Greensboro Woolworth's lunch counter. The counter can still be seen in a museum. While today we don't even think about such things, during this pivotal time in American history, sitting in the wrong seat or drinking from an unauthorized water fountain was considered a major violation of local laws and ordinances. Choice was the beginning of change. Protest beyond the law is not a departure from democracy. It is absolutely essential to it. Howard Zinn, a playwright, historian, and political science professor at Boston University. Unjust laws are not only those that enforce racial discrimination, but might also result from laws passed as a response to emotional influence. Perhaps no other emotional response is stronger than those invoked with the burning of the American flag. However, do such emotions warrant the passing of laws prohibiting the burning of the American flag in protest? The Flag Protection Act of 1968 was struck down by the Supreme Court in 1989, when the court heard arguments in the State of Texas versus Johnson 491 U.S. 397. Although against federal law, people continued to burn the American flag in protest of various policies of the United States government. I am not making the argument that the burning of the American flag is in any way appropriate and does nothing to advance any type of social cause. The destruction of the American flag does nothing but incite anger and animosity. But does that terrible act warrant the passing of laws prohibiting it? While it pains my heart to see the symbol of my country treated with such recklessness, the greater pain is the restriction of freedom and liberty. The civil disobedience of those bent on reckless burning of the American flag can be viewed as a justifiable act against an unconstitutional law. Quote, "It is not always the same thing to be a good man and a good citizen," end quote, says Aristotle in Nicomachean Ethics. Quote, "It is not enough for people to gain its liberty, it must secure it." Morals and Dogma. The securing of our rights was sealed when the Constitution of the United States was adopted and has ever since been used as the instrument of our liberty. Despite this framework of freedom, laws in this country have been passed that challenge its power and authority. Tyranny can often be disguised in the sheepskin of security and can easily mislead people. Knowledge of our freedoms and liberties provides the courage to not just rebel against unjust laws, but intimidation by authority is a powerful fear. The balance in between that guides us to what we should disobey is our morality. Civil disobedience is not about causing harm or injustice to our neighbors or our family, but an exercise of our moral convictions. Quote, I am free no matter what rules surround me. If I find them tolerable, I tolerate them. If I find them too obnoxious, I break them. I am free because I know that I alone am morally responsible for everything I do, says Robert A. Heinlein, U.S. Navy retired and aeronautical engineer. He became a science fiction writer, insisting that his fiction be scientifically accurate. The hidden question within the scope of civil disobedience is who exactly benefits from such an act of defiance. One could rightly argue that the country itself will benefit by the removal of unjust laws. The masses themselves will most certainly benefit as a whole. How does an act of civil disobedience benefit the individual person? Consider this quote from former Vice President Joe Biden. The civil rights movement did more to free the white man than the black man. It freed my soul. End quote. The profound nature of this quote is beyond measurement. In no manner is the quote intended to downgrade the injustices inflicted on African Americans in the course of American history. What should be examined is the concept of freeing one's soul from ignorance, tyranny, and bigotry. Speaking specifically to this quote, white Americans who participated in civil disobedience during the civil rights movement ushered in a new age of civility among the races. In doing so, all the people began to reach a deeper understanding of justice. Freeing the soul from the binds of ignorance and bigotry allowed for the spiritual growth of all men. The liberation of the soul would not have begun if not for the willingness to defy the unjust policies, ordinances, and laws by means of civil disobedience. The wind blows and change happens. The change might be something as trifling as the slightest movement of a leaf on the ground or as drastic as the destruction of a building. But change will happen. Civil disobedience, conducted within the scope of moral and decent behavior, is the wind of change, capable of liberating people from the rule of an unjust law. The moral duty of all people is to be on constant guard against the unjust and protest in a civil manner, as the occasion dictates. That which is not just is not law. William Lloyd Garrison. Wow, what a powerful piece. And there are those out there that might ask, what was Masonic about this outside of the author? Everything about this was Masonic. Was it political? Sure, it touched on political ideas, but it is not political. It's about civics, being a citizen, a peaceable citizen. It's about our founding fathers and the documents that they put together. It's about progressive morals. As our civilization moves forward, things change. The removal of the bonds of ignorance. So I have to thank Brother Andy Albright for this great look, and thanks for allowing us to read it on the show and give it a broader audience. For our Craftsman Plus, I'd love to hear your comments around the ideas of the civil rights movement. I wasn't alive then. I'm 41. I was born in 1981. And through Freemasonry, I sit in lodge and I converse with those people who are my peers and older than I am, who did live through the civil rights era. And I'd love to hear some of our brothers tell their stories about living through the era of civil rights and if they took a part in things. And I'd love to hear some of those stories, the civil rights era from Freemasons who lived it. Next up, for a contemplative exercise, I'm going to do our normal tarot card draw. We're going to pull one card from one of the decks that I have, and we'll talk about what the card means, how it might relate to us in our daily lives, and more importantly, Masonically. As I've said in the past, tarot has nothing to do with Freemasonry, outside of the fact it is another implement for your toolbox. That being said, what I mean by that is, just as the 24-inch gauge reminds you to manage your time, tarot cards are more situational. Instead, it says, here's a situation. How does that work in with your current life? Just like the 24-inch gauge might say, hey, are you using this tool to manage 8, 16, 24 kind of thing for your daily life? So it's just a tool. It's almost like a Rorschach, but scenario based. So for this week, we're going to pick a deck here in just a moment, but I have to laugh because last week we picked the William Blake Tarot, and the episode came out, and everybody listens to it on Monday usually. And Monday happened to be William Blake's birthday. Brother Patrick Day sent me a text message, and I was like, oh my God, I had no idea. It's real serendipity here. But I had no plan on doing that, so it was just kind of funny the way that worked out. So this week I'm going to do the Gothic Tarot by Anne Stokes, or Annie Stokes. I don't know how she pronounces her name. But in any case, all original artwork, really cool stuff. Typical 78 card deck. Nothing's really different. Meanings and things are going to be the same as outlined by Smith and Waite. Possible some different things along the way. So I'll give what they mean from this system, but then also a more contemporary view on how it can be for your practical life. So let's go ahead and take a look. This deck in particular is kind of cool. The artwork is, as you can imagine, gothic, a little sensual, a little vampiric, if you will, dragons and that kind of thing. The deck overall is very feminine in nature. Just going to give them a quick shuffle here. Little spread here. I'm just going to pull one card right here. That's going to be our card. I'm going to put the rest away. All right. We got the Six of Wands. So the way this deck works a lot with its minor arcana is very much similar to the Marseille deck in that there's not a lot of symbolry that's happening along with the minor arcana. So it's just a wand, and then there's like 6 dragons, so it's a Six of Wands. But we also drew it inversed. So according to their white book, which by the way is in 4 languages, so that's kind of neat. Now, very simply, they don't provide inverse interpretations, which is probably why the reverse of the cards is not mirrored so that you know like which side is which. It's very plain to see. It just says Anne Stokes Collection, so you just flip it over and it would be upright. So Six of Wands, and it just simply says to stand victorious and extend our breast with pride. These wondrous monuments of triumph, how seldom you see them shine. So it takes it to a poetic place. But what does the card mean? Well, it seems to talk about some pride. It's a wand, so it's a masculine card that deals with manifestation. Typically, the card itself, the way it looks, is a woman or a man riding on a white horse with the 6 wands, or they could be like sticks, represented. But in general, it's success. It's getting seen by your peers or even the public as somebody who has been recognized for doing great things. It means that you have made real progress and you have leveled up in terms of your own personal confidence. And also, the rider of the horse has a laurel wreath around them so that it's indicating victory. And the people that are holding the wands up around you are considered to be cheering people. So it's a great card to have. But what does it mean? This card can come up if you personally have had a breakthrough, some sort of a important achievement, in your life. Think about maybe you got that warden certificate, or you lost some weight and you now fit in that tux. That's great. This card in general really tells us that you have achieved something. And what's great is, what does that mean for us, right? Because who cares? Like, why does it matter for a card to say, oh yeah, I did this thing? How does that help you in the future? Well, aside from making a statement about something that may or may not have occurred, right, you most certainly have had some sort of achievement. The card is encouraging, and it says that it's okay to put on your resume that you're an award-winning something. It's okay to be out there and be proud of what you have done. you're allowed to brag a little bit. And what you're going to find out is that people are going to generally be happy for you as well. You need to open yourself up to allow people to show their appreciation for your talents. Many times in masonry, somebody says, "Oh, this guy's amazing," and we just shut it off and we say, no. Just say thanks. So overall, this card is a positive encouragement, and it says, hey, you're doing great. You've made some awesome accomplishments. Just say thank you. But also, the 6 is in the midst of the deck, so we still have a way to go. There might be some further challenges on down the road, but know that you actually have marked achievement here. And a lot of times we don't know where we stand. Who's around us? Who can we trust? And it's those people who truly appreciate what you've accomplished right now. So you have support of the people around you, and it's just reassuring to say, hey, keep making that progress. I'm going to put an image of the card in the Facebook group, but also I'm going to put a traditional image of the card next to it so that you can see both, because it helps to visualize with that original Pamela Coleman Smith artwork exactly what it's about. But that's it for this week. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I hope you all learned something amazing. I know I did. As always, I want to thank our producers, fellows, contributors, and legacy partners for allowing us to bring the show to everyone out there who is interested in Freemasonry and its kindred sciences. If you are curious about how you can assist the WCY podcast and its mission to bring Masonic education to the world, head on over to WCYpodcast.com, click on support the show, and check out your options. That's it. We'll talk to you all next week, and until then, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson. Take care.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.
WY Media.
That's it. Casual.